All right, we'll say good evening. A great Zechus Baruch Hashem to begin our next sugya. So tonight we are starting on the bottom of Mem Tes Amud Beis 49b at the Gemara. So Amr Shmuel. Shmuel says as follows. So remember again in the Mishnah we had a really interesting discussion. At least I think it was an interesting discussion about the different formulations for benching. So Shmuel says as follows: the olam al yotzi adam atzal min haklal. So this is a beautiful, beautiful Gemara. Shmuel says, whatever you do, never remove yourself from the collective. Now, Shmuel over here is stating a halachic precept. So, for example, now what is Shmuel coming to say? So, remember again, Shmuel is trying to say that when you bench, benching should always be done as a collective unit. In other words, we're going to question this from the Mishnah in just a moment, but this is his model when it comes to benching. Benching should be done in a collective unit. What is fascinating to see about this idea of Shmuel on a hashkafic level is quite profound as well. The power of our people is when we are a collective. The power of our people is in our achdus. The power of our people is when there is a klal. It's interesting that there's two ways in which we refer to the Jewish people. There's Am Yisrael and there's Klal Yisrael. You ever wonder to yourself, what's the difference between that? We often use them interchangeably. Am Yisrael, Klal Yisrael. So I've often thought that Klal Yisrael is a much stronger word, because klal means an inclusionary nation, right? Klal Yisrael, again, Am means we're a nation. Nation, by definition, of course, means that there's a unity in identity, but not necessarily a full-fledged unity. I think Klal Yisrael, the idea of an inclusionary people, the idea where everyone looks out for each other, the idea where everyone cares about each other, even if they don't agree with one another, that's the power of our people. So Shmuel says, Li'olam al yotzi adam atzmo min haklal. Never remove yourself from the collective.
Isn't that the same thing mentioned in Others?
It could be yourself from the klal. After Tifar Shminat Tzibor. Right. So you're there. Use lotion of Tzibor. It's I was having a conversation with. I know I said last night that I was not going to go off on tangents and stick to the Gemara, but this just happened. It's just happened the other day. It was so interesting. Somebody was telling me about their vacation plans. And they were telling me that they go to vacation in this place and they love it because there are no Jews there. I was like, what does that mean? First of all, what are you doing on vacation that you can't be around Jews? That's what are you eating, like chazer? What are you you're roasting a whole pig in the backyard? What are you doing exactly on vacation that you can't be around? I was just so fascinated by it. I understand not wanting to go away to somewhere where you know anyone. I got it. You don't want to socialize. You just want to be. But I found that I was actually to be honest, I was offended. I was offended by it. I was like, why do you need to... So you'd rather just vacation amongst the Goyim? That for you is better? You enjoy that more than being amongst your people? It was just I don't know, it was such a shock to the system. I think I maintained myself pretty well. I didn't express my shock, but internally, and a person doesn't listen to this here. So internally, I was just very jarred by it. And then again, you see this statement of Shmuel: the power of our people is when you're part of the klal. That's the power of Klal Yisrael. It's the power of Klal Yisrael. Anyway, so the Gemara says, is that so? Tanan. Remember again, what did the Mishnah say? The Mishnah said if you're benching with a group of 4 people, right? So remember again, there's a mezumin, and there's you. The Mishnah gave a different formulation. So remember again, the Mishnah itself is so. Remember again, if there's 3, we're benching as a unit. If there's four, then ultimately, again, it's almost as if I, as the leader, kind of lead the rest of the collective, but independently of the collective. So you see from here that a person is removing themselves from the group. Top of Nun 50a, af barchu. The Gemara says, no, ema af barchu. No, what it means is like this. If you have a group of 4, there are 2 formulations you could use. You could either bench as a group and say nevarich, or you could kind of assume the position of leader and group, and ultimately charge the group with benching and say Baruch. So either formulation is acceptable. The Mishnah is not saying that you have to remove yourself from the group. It's just giving you that possibility. Okay? But still, it is better to bench as part of the group than it is to bench, than it is to give the charge to the group to bench. This is a really beautiful idea. The power of Achdus, the power of being, even if you have 4, the Gemara says, as much as technically speaking, you could have a benching leader, and that leader could tell the group, Baruch Hu, it is much better to bench as a cohesive group and say Nevarech together than to go ahead and say Baruch Hu. Incredible. Amri Beirav Tanina. Shisha Nechlakin ala Sara. If you have 6 people eating together and they want to split off into groups, they get split off into smaller groups to bench up until the number 10. Because remember, again, as you saw in the Mishnah, once you have 10, 10 should really bench as a cohesive unit, because with 10 you have a minyan. With a minyan you can add in the name of Hashem. So between like 6 and 10, you could split off into separate groups. In other words, you want to have, 2 groups of 3 and 1 group of 4, that's fine. That's fine. Well, actually, no. Up until 10. So really, if you have 9, you could split up into 3 groups of 3. That's fine. Once you hit 10, you really should go ahead and bench as a group. So the Gemara says, so if you understand, that's because, so we'll say, here's what's interesting about that. That presupposes that a group of 3 and a group of 4 are really benching in the same way. Right? That, in other words, that everybody's saying the varich, and it's better not to exclude yourself from the group. But at the end of the day, if you think that it's better to have groups of 4, because then with groups of 4 you could have the leader, and the leader gives the other 3 the charge, then really what you should do it at most is break up into a group of 5 and 4, not into smaller groups than that. So the Gemara says, rather, again, what do you see from here? You see from here that we don't really accept this concept of Baruch Hu, which again, Abba says, why, when you read the Mishnah, if that concept never looked familiar to you, it's not because you missed anything, it's because we don't do that. We don't really have that concept that when you have 3, it's Nevarech, it's a Mezuman, and then when you have 4, you kind of have the leader, and the leader charges the group. Because the problem with that model that we don't like is the leader becomes separate from the group. And as Shmuel said, the entire avoda of a Jew is to be part of the klal. It's so beautiful. So the Gemara says as follows, Shema Mina, Tanya Nami Brisa that supports this, Bein Sha'amar Baruch Hu, Bein Sha'amar Nevarech, Ein Tovsin Osa Al-Kach. This is interesting. So whether you said Baruch Hu, whether you said Nevarech. So in other words, if let's say you're a group of 4, let's say you're a group of 4 people we're benching. So whether as a group of 4 we said Nevarech, like a regular Mezumin, or we kind of adopted that leader group model, and one said Baruch Hu, everyone else followed suit, either way you're fine. Ein Tovsin also means you have options. You have options. However, V'hanakdonin Tovsin also. So this is interesting. The nakdonin. The nakdonin are the Rashi says over here, davkonin, meticulous ones. The meticulous ones are the ones who are very meticulous and very, hyper-focused on the detail of every halacha. So the nakdonin saw our Mishnah. And in the Mishnah it says that there's a difference between the way 3 bench and 4 bench. Okay. Yomi-Berachos of shal adam nikar im tamid chachomu. Now I will say this is actually quite beautiful. The Gemara says you could tell a lot about a person from the way he makes his brachas. From the way a person makes his brachas, you can tell a lot about an individual. For example, you can see if someone's a Torah scholar or not from the way that he makes his brachas. Keitzad. So, for example, what? Rabbi Omer, uvituvo harezet hamid chacham. So this is very interesting. So let's say by benching, right? If let's say in benching it says, right, Baruch shachanu mishalo, uvituvo chayinu, and in his or with his good we are sustained. Ubituvo, with his good we are sustained. Person who uses lashon of bituvo, with his good, that's a Talmud Chacham. Mituvo, but if a person says from his good, his being God, from his good we are sustained, harei zabor. Such a person like that is ignorant. Now we'll say, what's the difference between bituvo and mituvo? So this is actually interesting. So bituvo really represents the totality of God's greatness. Mituvo makes it sound like we are only the beneficiaries of some of God's goodness. See here, so if I say, let's bless Hashem, bituvo, through whose good we live, that means I feel myself to be the beneficiary of all of his blessings. Mituvo, if I say from his good, that means I'm getting some bracha, but there's a lot of other stuff that I'm not getting. So that's looked at as disparaging of God, and therefore that's considered to be an ignorant statement. Amar le Abaye le Rav Dimi, v'aksiv umi birchasecha yivarech espeis avdecha liolam. But the Gemara quotes the pasuk over here from the Navi Shmuel, from Shmuel Beis, where it says, and from his blessings, he will bless the home of your servant forever. So you see this lashon of Yomi-Berachos, and it doesn't say Berachos, it says from your brachos. So the Gemara says, B'she'ila shayni. That's different. That was a request. There's a difference between a declarative statement and a request. When it comes to a declarative statement, you don't want to make it sound like you're only speaking about some of the blessings of God. You want to speak about the blessings of God in their totality. When you're asking for something, a request, I'm requesting ultimately some of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's blessings. So the Gemara says, so basically, Bishlam nami haksiv, herchav picha va'amalehu. So I'm sorry, b'she'ela nami haksiv. What about by request? What do we see? We say, open your mouth, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to us, so to speak, open your mouth, and I will fill it. Open your mouth, and I will fill it. So Rashi says over here, Lishal kol ta'avascha. That means ask for everything. So you see over here that even when it comes to a request, we don't just ask for some blessings, we ask for all blessings. Literally, again, I'm opening my mouth and asking Hashem to fill me with all of His blessings. To which the Gemara says, it's quite beautiful. The Gemara says, Hahu b'divrei Torah ksiv. That phrase of open your mouth and I will fill it with everything, that's a reference to Torah, to spirituality. Well, isn't that beautiful? When it comes to material blessing, you can't ask God for everything. For the simple reason, you're not going to get everything. Right? You're not going to get everything. Right? Even Jeff Bezos doesn't have everything. Right? I don't know. Or maybe he does. I don't know. But let me say, nobody has everything. So therefore, to ask God for everything in the material sense, that doesn't make sense. But to ask God for everything in the spiritual sense, that you could do. Which is such a beautiful idea. Now again, is it going to be that I'm going to get every drop of spirituality? Probably not. But in spirituality, you're allowed to ask big. You're allowed to ask big. In the material world, you could also ask big, but you're big. Like I will say, I think I have to think about this. Like, I don't know why this came out. But can you ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu to be a billionaire? Like, you ever think about this? Like, can I request? Shema Kolinu, I'm davening. Hashem, I want to be a billionaire. I mean, obviously you have to work, right? But I'm saying, but Lamaisa, is that an appropriate request, inappropriate request? So there's a piece of me that feels that it's an incredibly inappropriate request because it's not necessary. Now, again, I guess if a person says, I want to be a billionaire because if I'm a billionaire, I'm going to support every yeshiva, every shul, there's not going to be any more poor people in my community. Okay, that I could hear. That I could hear a lot more. But I don't know, there's something about it, like as a request, that feels strange. Yet imagine for a moment a person were to say, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, please allow me to become the greatest Talmid Chacham of the generation. Imagine a person davening for that. So the truth is, the probability of that is probably quite nil. But there's such a beauty in the request, right? You hear the difference? Like, you hear someone simple asking for enormous spirituality, and that's like incredible. And then you hear someone asking for enormous materialism. Like I'm talking about like enormous. I don't mean somebody who davens for parnasa. We all daven for parnasa, and we all daven for a livelihood. And we should all daven to have more than what we need, right? Because the truth is, who doesn't want like a little bit more like his life? Oh, of course, 100%. By the way, no different with parnasa, right? I daven for parnasa every day. There's a recognition that davening for parnasa is not nearly enough. 100%. I'm just trying to contrast a person, and I'm willing to do the work in both cases. I'll work 3 jobs to become a billionaire, right? I think it's just fascinating to see the dichotomy in the requests, right? The material request to become a billionaire, I think anyone would say, like, I don't know, sounds weird. Why do you need that? And yet the request to become the greatest Torah scholar in the generation, of course, I have to work for it, no question. But there's a beauty in that ask. So it's incredible. So the Gemara says over here in this pasuk in Tehillim, when David HaMelech says, Herchav picha v'amaleu, that Hashem says to us, open your mouth, which means like literally ask and ask and ask. And whatever you ask for, I'll give you. The Gemara says, that's not by materialism. That's by spirituality. If you ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu for help in your ruchnius, and as Rabbi just mentioned, you are willing to do the work. There is no end to what you can accomplish. Because we'll say it's important to understand that, remember, and this is one of the most beautiful things in Yiddishkeit, the metric of spiritual success in Judaism has nothing to do with how many pages of Gemara you know. Because right, let's say somebody doesn't have the intellect to learn Gemara, right? You have to have the processing skills. You have to have the skills to be able to do so. So the beautiful part now of how many pages learning Gemara is beautiful because there's beauty in every single page. But the metric of spiritual success is the nature of your connection and closeness to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's ruchnius. Now it comes a lot from this, and it comes from tzedakah, and it comes from chesed, and it comes from davening. But that's the beautiful part. Like a person can say HaKadosh Baruch Hu, like, I'm opening my mouth, fill me up with as much spirituality as you can. Again, I'm ready to do the hard work, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I'm willing to ask you for anything and everything under the sun. In the name of spirituality, that is an appropriate tefillah. It's so beautiful. Tanya, Rabbi Omer, ubituvo chayinu, harei zeh talmid chacham. If a person says, bituvo chayinu, with your good we live, we are sustained, harei zeh talmid chacham, that is a talmid chacham chayim. If a person just says, ubituvo chayim, so there is life, then harei zeh bor. So we'll say, what's the difference between those? The difference between those is, one is a personalized bracha, and one is just like a general statement. Bituvo chayinu is us recognizing, I live because of the goodness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's what gives me life. Ubituvo chayim, it literally translates as a result of the goodness of Hashem, chayim. What's chayim? They live. So only other people live because of the goodness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Me, what? I'm like battery powered. Like what's the pshat over there? So therefore, again, and I will say these. What's fascinating about this, probably if you notice, these are such nuanced differences, right? Ubituvo chayinu, bituvo chayim. And yet, amazingly enough, what's the difference in those formulations? One person is considered to be a talmid chacham, and one is a bor. And one is a bor. And I want to point out, by the way, bor is even worse than an am haaretz, right? Like an am haaretz is someone who's ignorant. A bor means someone who's like empty. Like a bar is like a pet, like a boor, literally like a boor, like boor, is just vacuous, just like empty. I'm sorry.
The translation is ignoramus.
Ignoramus, right? Which is like even more than someone who's even more than is ignoramus worse than ignorant? Sounds like it is, right? Sounds like it's different. Whatever. I'm just pointing out that generally the word for someone who's ignorant is an am haaretz. That's the term. That represents someone who doesn't have knowledge. A bor is something much more significant, right? It's an emptier state. It's just fascinating to see, right? Just fascinating to see over here how, we often think that, the space between the Talmid Chacham and the Am Haaretz is, vast. And isn't it incredible that it's pretty much one letter, right? Chayim, chayinu. It's just fascinating that sometimes, again, that line between piety and emptiness, right? That line between a Talmid Chacham and a bor, it's not as wide as we think it is. All right, incredible. Let's do one more line, then we'll start for tonight. So then the Ha'Elohim, they did it just the opposite. Less hilchasa kan Arbalai. But ultimately, again, the halacha doesn't follow them. So therefore, both say, so this is why, again, we have, our formulation is bituvo chayinu, right? This is how we bench. This is a mizumin. Baruch shachanlu mishalo uvituvo chayinu. Now we understand the formulation, because we're thanking Hashem for the life He has given us. If it would just be bituvo chayim, sounds like we're talking about someone else. Ubituvo chayinu, ultimately we're talking about ourselves. Right, both say, shkoyach, incredible. We will continue Hashem tomorrow night. Shkoyach, at the same time.